Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 338 of the All Dolphins podcast on this Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, where I'm live, not from Hard Rock Stadium, actually. That's just my background screen. I am actually in Tampa for the one joint practice of the week. Senor Perkins is driving up tomorrow morning because you're a maniac who wants to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's some crazy stuff there.
Dude, I'm usually up at 6. I take during the season. I take 6 a.m. flights on the regular, so this is not a big deal.
Okay, oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's not an egregious drive. I did it, and then for me, I kind of like the kind of drive because it's music on blast with the iPhone, and one of my all-time favorites came up. I'm going to guess you've never heard of it. I challenged Omar Kelly when he was a co-host to listen to it, at least give it a chance. And of course, Omar completely poo-pooed it. And I'm going to repeat it. And all the listeners out there, especially older ones, if you happen to have any sort of liking for prog rock, the song is called Ripples by Genesis. It is one of my all-time favorites. Top 3 easily. So that came on and I was singing my little heart away. And it's a good thing nobody heard me because I can't sing. So anyway, you're not here to hear me talk about Genesis, Ripples, or my singing. You are here joining us on the All Dolphins podcast. And thanks for everyone who's tuning in to hear us talk about the Dolphins. And there are a lot of interesting, touchy topics. And the gentleman to my right or my left, depending on where you're looking, I don't even know how it's going to show up on the screen, stirred the pot a little bit with his column today on sunsentinel.com. And Mr. Perkins, we are definitely going to address that a little bit later in the show. We're going to address Tyreek Hill's situation, and there's their cause for concern. We're going to address Brian Flores' response to his comments, and then notes from a fairly light practice before the Dolphins flew to Tampa. They fly, we drive, for the one joint practice in the preseason game on Friday night. Where do you want to start, Perk? Do you want to go dive right straight into your column, or is that too soon?
No, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. No, actually, I'm gonna take that back. I'm gonna take back the option because we need to set it up before, because it's kind of an offshoot of the Tua Brian Flores situation.
Yep.
So Brian Flores was scheduled to speak to the media today, regardless. And it just so happened to come in the wake of Tua's comments on the Dan Le Batard with Stugat show, in which he characterized their relationship as basically Brian Flores dumping on him on a daily basis, telling him, you don't deserve to be here. We should get another quarterback. You suck, basically. Brian Flores, very interesting that he was flanked by 2 defensive players at the podium in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice touch by those 2 guys. I mean, show us support. And this is part of what I think I said, that probably not on the podcast, but in the comments, that not everybody, Brian Flores did not necessarily do a great job in terms of player relationships. Not everybody hated Brian Flores. I think there are a lot of guys on defense who had a lot of respect for Brian Flores. I know Jerome Baker, for one.
I think Christian Wilkins.
There you go, Christian Wilkins. And they're not the only ones.
Yep.
I think they respect his mind. Is there a consensus that maybe he could not be such a hard ass and be so negative? Sure. So anyway, but Brian Flores is among the highlights of his comments, and every outlet has addressed it. Sentinel.com has it. We have it on Miami Dolphins on SI. The highlights was very happy to see Tua's success. Kind of would like to meet with Tua at some point to mend the fences, and then kind of was impacted a little bit, for lack of a better term, by Tua's comments. And maybe it was like, I don't know if it was eye-opening to him, or maybe that it was put out there so publicly made him realize, well, yeah, maybe I was a little bit over the top.
Yeah, and look, and so my column was.
Whoa! Time out, bro.
Okay.
Your column. Don't dive into it.
All right. So yeah, it was good to hear that this impacted Flo. And he said, it was something that wasn't a positive for him, and he'll use it to get better. And that's a good outcome for this, right? So, I think that Flo is the one who is at fault here. You know, we've seen from Tua, it's not like Tua was baiting Flo or was asking Flo to prompting Flo to be rude to him or anything. That's kind of how Flo is, and to me, Flo has to understand that he grew up in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, very rough neighborhood. And not everybody gets down the way he gets down. Not everybody is motivated by the same methods and tactics that motivate him. And so you've got to judge each player as an individual and see, how do I connect with this guy? And I think Flo is just kind of a one size fits all type guy. You're either on the bus or you're off. And that's not a good way to operate.
No, I agree. And again, based on what Tua said to me, and again, I wasn't there. Flores didn't dispute the facts.
Right.
But because Tua made it seem like if it's every single solitary day, that's over the top. And like I said yesterday, I'm old school, and I am perfectly on board with players getting a kick in the ass every once in a while.
Yep.
As a motivational tool. But the constant pounding of you suck, you suck, you suck, yeah, that's over the top. That's not right. Which brings us to your column, because obviously when Mike McDaniel is the opposite approach, at the very least publicly, here's the thing is we don't know behind closed doors. And that's a point that I think that we need to bring up. Publicly, yes. Mike McDaniel and his coaching staff will never, ever criticize anybody. And this is why I like caution against putting too much stock in the coach's comments and the teammates' comments, because everybody's a superstar in training camp. Everybody's playing well, everybody's doing a good job and all that.
Yep.
Behind closed doors, we don't know how much Mike McDaniel kicks ass. I don't believe he would be all sunshine and roses all the time as he is publicly. But publicly, that's what the Dolphins' approach is. And then that brings us to your column. The floor is yours. Take as much time as you need.
Yeah, and first of all, as far as McDaniel getting on people, I did do a column on that last year, and I asked, one of the people that I asked was Jeff Wilson, one of the people who knows him best, and he said, yeah, he'll raise his voice, but he doesn't really get on you. That's not how Mike McDaniel is. And so, my column was really about the methodology, the Brian Flores methodology, that old school stuff of berating players and getting on them and using that to motivate them, using negative means to motivate them, versus the Mike McDaniel way, which is player empowerment. You listen to the players, you give them positive feedback and positive thoughts so that you can get the best version of that player out of that player. I favor that approach. I like that approach. That's the approach that I think overall works best. However, the old school NFL approach does get results. And if you ask me, if you look at the rosters that each coach had, Flo and McDaniel, I think Flo got more out of his roster. Flo was 24-25. That's a .490 winning percentage. Mike McDaniel is 20-16, including the playoffs. That's a .556 winning percentage. That's pretty close. Flo had a 10-win season and a 9-win season.
Can I interject quickly?
Yes.
Because the overall record by Flores we need to mention this when we talk about the overall record with Flores, is 2019 really shouldn't count because it was a tanking year.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
That 5-11 season, you're absolutely correct. So really the thing is, what I said is that while I favor the McDaniel approach, and I hope that it works, and I said I'm pulling for McDaniel. I like McDaniel. I respect McDaniel. I want his approach to work. I think that's the right way, but I've got to see better results. Relative to this roster, you should have a playoff victory right now, but they don't. And so to me, that's underachieving. And is the methodology a factor? I don't know. But as I said in the column, as we hear from players from other teams, Jordan Poyer, if you hit this team in the mouth, they tend to fold. Calais Campbell, when I was looking around for teams as a free agent, I always heard it's a little easier here. And Campbell said he found out that that's not the case. But that's kind of the thing that Mike McDaniel is running, where the veterans get plenty of time off during training camp, plenty of time off, veteran rest days during the season. And you wonder, why not just, discipline these guys every now and then publicly? Every player, like you said, is doing great. No player needs to improve in any area. It's all positive, positive, positive. And you wonder what drives these players. What's really, I know that, you should be self-motivated right now, but I'm not advocating the flow way. I don't like that old school way, but relative to the roster, I think Flo definitely got more out of his roster than McDaniel has to this point.
Couple of points that I'd like to make, if I may. I think both you and I can agree that these are two coaches who have a side of the ball expertise and kind of delegate on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Dolphin fans who just want to piss on Brian Flores because of his personality. I'm sorry, but the guy, when it came to X's and O's defensively, damn. Good. And by the way, if there was somebody in the comments yesterday who suggested, he delegated on defense. No, he didn't. His fingerprints were all over that defense in the 3 years he was head coach. Hate to break it to you. Mike McDaniels, obviously, his forte is the offense. And he kind of delegates on defense with guys. Ideally, now he's got a guy whose vision in terms of dealing with players aligns with him a lot more than Vic Fangio did.
Mm-hmm.
And now the question becomes, because X's and O's, it's not all about just strictly motivating people, it's about X's and O's.
Yep.
And the question is, I hate doing this, is Mike McDaniel as good in his X's and O's offensively as Brian Flores was defensively? And I have a ton of respect for Mike McDaniel's X's and O's offensively, because I think his designs are great. And this is why when I get accused of defending Brian Flores over the top, because I have an insane amount of respect for his defensive mind when it comes to X's and O's. Because you talk about, the juice he squeezed out a lot of those players and that overall talent in 2020 and 2021.
Yep.
Damn. Right. Is it a coincidence that Emmanuel Ogbah had two really, really good seasons in his first 2 years with Flo and not so much the last 2 years? Pure coincidence? Is it pure coincidence Jerome Baker's best years came with Flores? And then the other part is the counterpoint to your argument, though, is could the argument not be made that what you're doing is unfair to McDaniel, because while they were not the sole reason for the failures in the playoffs, injuries did hamper this team down the stretch last year?
Yep, definitely. Injuries did, but my thing, Poop, that this team under McDaniel, 17-4 against non-playoff teams, 3-12 against playoff teams, and you can't tell me they had major injuries every time they faced a playoff team and they were healthy when they faced non-playoff teams. Or it was cold when they faced playoff teams and it was great weather when they faced non-playoff teams. Yeah. At a certain point, you just got to win. And, last year you beat Tennessee and you get the home playoff game, and you beat Pittsburgh in that home playoff game, and now you're off and running, or whatever that circumstance would have been. And so at a certain point, you've just got to win more of these regular season games and more of these key games, right? Again, Tennessee was a key game. It's an AFC opponent. It's a late season game. The Buffalo game, a key game early in the season or late in the season. You pick whichever one. Kansas City, AFC opponent. That's a key game. So sometimes it's which games you win along with winning more games.
Yeah, here's my problem. And I know a lot. This is, again, it's not just Dolphin fans. As national media people also just zero in on that Tennessee game where the Dolphins completely messed up. Well, here's the thing. Number one is, even after they messed that up, they still had two shots down the stretch against big boys, and they didn't measure up. That's number one. Number two, look around the NFL. Every single solitary team had one nasty, ugly loss against a team they really should beat. So are we going to say what the Dolphins are not supposed to lose to any team that's inferior to them because they're the Dolphins? This is why, and it also the other part of that game, it wasn't just strictly a late collapse. They played like crap the entire night. They got 2 lucky turnovers to turn a 13-13 game against a really bad Tennessee team that had injuries up the wazoo to go up 27-13 with like 5 minutes left. This was not a game where they were in control the whole way and all of a sudden fell apart. No, they were like languishing the whole game. So, yeah, the litmus test is going to be, again, and to me, and this is a part, you mentioned this point, we can't get away from this when we look at this Dolphin team where the question mark is going to remain until they beat big boys, because the stat is 1-12 in their last 13 against teams that made the playoffs that season.
Yep.
That's damning. And again, like you said, not every one of those games came with injury. And I'm like you, obviously, you want the nicer guide approach to do well. And if you look, I don't think Andy Reid has a reputation as being a hard ass.
No, he's a progressive, and Sean,
Sean McVay is a lot of success.
Progressive, yeah.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yep. But I would say, McDaniel even takes that a step further, right? What those guys are doing with the days off and with the, I don't know, the Tyreek Hill, you approve Eli Apple and we'll bring him on the roster. And, I know that was overplayed. I know that may have been a joke. I know, Poop, but just you put that out there. And you let it linger and just, and look, I like what McDaniel is doing. I hope it works, but he takes it a step beyond, or else Jordan Poyer and Calais Campbell wouldn't have said what they said, right? That's one of the ways that you really know what people are saying and thinking about this team around the league is you hear from other players. And that's, like Clay said, it's a little easier here. That's the reputation. And Jordan Poyer, when you punch them, they might not punch back. And so you don't hear that about an Andy Reid team, right? You don't hear that about a Sean McVay team. And so that's what I'm saying. McDaniel takes it a little bit beyond. Now, look, if Mike McDaniel wins, and what I said was you can call it the great experiment. He's kind of trying to change the league, right? He's trying to be a trendsetter, an innovator. If he wins the Super Bowl, you're going to see a lot more veteran rest days around the league, right, during the season. And a lot of the stuff that he's doing will be emulated. We've seen the jet motion be emulated, but he's got to show that this is the effective way of doing it. And again, he's beyond Sean McVay and Andy Reid and some of these other guys. So that's kind of the big test, the way I see it.
2 quick points. The notion of vet rest days is nothing new. I think, in fact, unless I'm mistaken, Brian Flores had vet rest days during the regular season. Here's the other issue with the whole load management thing, and this is where if the Dolphins decided to be one of those teams who were very transparent with injuries in training camp, say a la Philadelphia Eagles, who last I checked have had immense success the last few years, where before every practice, they'll run down the list of those who will not practice and what their injuries are.
Yeah.
Well, because now it's possible that those guys who are on load management, they're actually dealing with something, and then the Dolphins are just being very cautious. Now, we know it's an injury for a fact when the guy's missing like back-to-back practices or longer. But for guys who are on and off, again, this is where, to me, I would advocate. Well, I advocate it because I'm in the media, and I think fans also would like that. And I know everything's about competitive advantage and all that. Is there really a competitive disadvantage to listing your injuries? Because guess what? Come September 4th, the first Wednesday of the regular season, you have to list anybody who does not have a full practice participation or who gets treatment anyway. So I don't know that it makes a difference in training camp. That's just me.
Yeah, no, I think it makes less of a difference in training camp. Like the joint practices are the big thing in training camp, right? By the time you get to the game, like you might as well tell us who's playing and who's not playing, because your best players probably aren't playing. And if they are playing, they aren't playing for long.
Speaking of injuries,
Yes.
Now we have a potential new one, and I say it potential only because I say this with the utmost respect in the world. With Tyreek, you never know if he's just trolling and going, let me get the media going. I'm going to wear a brace around my right hand. But yes, Tyreek wore a brace around his right hand at practice on Tuesday.
Can I just say, I believe that I saw on NFL.com that they had our Cam Wolf reports that Tyreek is dealing with a minor hand injury. So that is out there, and we trust and respect Cam. So minor hand injury, but right, who knows what that is? Because it's Tyreek. Who knows what it. Does he have 2 stitches in his hand? Did he bend his finger back? Playing a video game. Who knows? Or maybe it's serious, but he was out there running around today, just not catching passes. He did a little running around, a couple of routes, right?
Correct. And we were more than 2.5 weeks before the start of the regular season, so I certainly would not push the panic button. But again, we're not talking about an insignificant player on this roster. So,
yeah.
No, and then
pregame, pregame Friday. Remember when he was out there throwing the ball with OBJ and Jalen Waddle. Saturday. Sorry, Saturday. My days. Sorry, I know. Yeah, but he did not have a wrap around his hand. So, for what that's worth.
Interesting point. Again, like I'm going to mention, Tyreek likes to have fun. He's a self-described troll, and with all this stuff like challenging Noah Lyles to a race.
Right.
And spoiler alert, unless they're wearing shoulder pads and running 100 yards, sorry, I think Tyreek's going to lose no matter how fast he is, because sprinters are kind of different.
Yeah.
So today was kind of a lighter practice. There's no Tyreek. Jalen Waddle didn't do anything. However, the good news is there was increased participation or return to participation in 11-on-11 for Jalen Ramsey, Jordan Poyer. Teron Armstead did more things than he's done, I think, at any point during training camp. That was good to see. Jalen Phillips also did a lot of stuff in 11-on-11, looked very good in terms of his movement. So that was encouraging in a practice that otherwise was kind of like nondescript.
Yeah, I gave my stock up to the 30-somethings because with the guys that you mentioned, Teron, Raheem, Jordan Poyer, and we saw Calais Campbell out there. OBJ, not out there, but I thought it was a good representation for those 30-somethings that, you look at them and you those are the guys with the vet rest days and everything like that, but a good number of them were out there today.
Yeah, and we had 4 guys wearing red jerseys. That's a don't touch jersey. Chris Brooks, who didn't practice. Jalen Wright, who did practice, but had a red jersey.
Jody Fortson, Ethan Bonner.
And the other 2 were Jody Fortson and Ethan Bonner. I'm glad I remembered. I'm going to look at my practice report here that's on Miami Dolphins on SI for the remainder of the guys who did not practice, because we like to be thorough here and dish out all the news. The other ones who did not practice were River Craycraft, Braylon Sanders, Tanner Connor, Aaron Brewer, Kendall Lamb, Anthony Walker Jr., although I saw him watching practice the first time I've seen him in a bit, Benito Jones, Emmanuel Agba, Cam Smith, and Javon Holland. And I would imagine that among those players, probably none of them are playing on Friday night. The idea of the last preseason game basically is let's get through it. Let's get nobody injured. And then let's get done. We had the coordinators speak before practice on Tuesday, Danny Crossman, Frank Smith, and Anthony Weaver. And again, a lot of positivity. That's what they do. I think probably the biggest nugget I took out of everything was Anthony Weaver talking about Jalen Phillips' role early in the season. Wrote about it on Miami Dolphins on SI. I'll give you a quick spoiler alert. It's basically to be determined. How's that? I don't want to. You can't reveal everything on here.
That's right. Tease.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything stand out to you from the 3 coordinators?
Not really. It was good to hear Frank Smith kind of reinforce there's another level that this offense is going to get to, and we've heard Alec Ingold mention that. We've speculated the tight end might be more involved. It was good to see them on some short yardage situation run plays on Saturday. What, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2? They threw on 4th and 1, but I think there were they ran on 3 or 4 of them, or whatever it was. I'm encouraged that we see more big boy play calling from Mike McDaniel situationally. And, Frank Smith kind of went along with that today, just saying that, and what else is he going to say? But, that there are other things that other layers to this offense that he thinks that they can reveal and get into. So, that was probably my biggest takeaway from Frank Smith. Danny Crossman, I did think it was interesting where he was saying that they're still experimenting with who will handle kickoffs between Jake Bailey and Jason Sanders. And pregame, we saw both of them kicking very specific kicks, to specific areas. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you who did better, but they did share kickoff duties to a smaller extent last year and maybe the last 2 years. I don't know, last year, because he wasn't here. Jake Bailey wasn't here 2 years.
That would have been quite the feat.
That would have been something. And then, Anthony Weaver, nothing really stood out that he said, but I will say this, that I do like the inside linebackers. I think he might have talked about them, but Jordan Brooks and David Long, and they're backed up by Anthony Walker and Duke Riley. That is quietly
Channing Tindall. Don't forget Channing.
And Channing Tindall, right? Who also could make this roster as a core special teams player. I expect Quentin Bell will probably be on the 53 as a core special teams player mostly, although he'll get a lot of snaps from scrimmage. But I think that inside linebacker position is quietly one of the deepest and strongest positions on the team.
Fair. Anthony Weaver also was asked about his confidence level at the cornerback position beyond Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, and he mentioned that he likes his group very much. And again, this is where, and it needs to be pointed out. If it was Vic Fangio and Vic Fangio tells us, "Yeah, I really like that group," it's more believable than Anthony Weaver, because Anthony Weaver is going to tell us he likes that group regardless. And it's not a knock on Anthony Weaver. Then the Dolphins are not the only organization that does this. There are a lot of organizations that believe in the power of positivity at all times. And I'm not for gratuitous shots or dumping on your players unnecessarily, but I don't think there's anything wrong. And going back to this is circling back to the original point, and I'm gonna channel Jimmy Johnson here. Jimmy Johnson's big thing in terms of motivating players was everybody's an individual. He would treat players differently because they're not the same, and that's number one. They're not the same people, and then number two, they don't have the same importance to the team. And then, of course, there's the very famous story about, Kervin Richards, a running back, falling asleep in a team meeting. You're cut, and then somebody asking Jimmy Johnson, "What if Emmitt Smith had fallen asleep in the team meeting?" And Johnson said, "Very simple. I would have gone over, 'Hey, Emmitt, wake up.'" Again. And part of good coaching is maximizing your players' ability and putting them in the best position to succeed. And damn straight, there are certain players who probably operate better with, for lack of a better term, a hard ass on them, as opposed to the gentle approach. Some players, it doesn't work. It's the opposite.
Yeah. And so, I'm going to be interested to see with this team, the approach that Anthony Weaver takes, because he is a very player friendly guy, but coming from Baltimore, and he's a defensive, he was a defensive player. I wonder if he's going to tend to be a little more publicly critical, or he's a very positive. You can still be both. You can still be both. But I'm going to be very interested to see his approach, because he was very successful in Baltimore with his approach. And so I'll be very interested to see what it is as far as that.
And I have a thought, and I'm going to leave it with this thought. And this is because I can't help myself, because I know this is not going to go over well, and I'm going to get some nasty comments over it. But the premise and the promise made about this podcast is we're going to call it like it is. We are journalists covering the team, and good and bad. And we don't need to tell you this is a very good team with very intriguing possibility. If you're a Dolphin fan, you have every right to be excited. But you had a line that actually really touched a nerve with me in a positive way, as in with you right there. As much as I enjoy the creativity when the Dolphins score touchdowns, do they really need to be practicing sellies during the regular season?
Yeah.
I mean, we got a lot of mileage of the conga line that they did in the Denver game, and that was all great. Okay, where is that when you're playing at KC or playing Buffalo down the stretch?
Right.
I'm old school. I love the Barry Sanders method. Score a touchdown, hand the football to the ref. Like, there's a little part of me that says, act like you've been there before. And by all means, cue the grumpy old man comments in 3, 2, 1. Fire away.
Well, look, we've had it both ways, right? You remember was it the Fun Bunch in Denver, the Hogs in Washington back in the day with John Riggins? Like, we've seen the fun teams that were still grinders, that had plenty of personality. We saw Billy White Shoes Johnson with his end zone dance, right? Like, these were teams that had fun, but they were about their business. And I want to see that last part with the Dolphins. I want to see them more about business, because it's great to have fun. It's great to have fun, but it's even better when you have fun while fulfilling your potential. And I'm not sure that this roster has not fulfilled its potential. You should have a playoff victory by now. Do end zone sellies have anything to do with that? Probably not. But it holds you up for a little more scrutiny. What are you really in this thing for?
Yeah, and we've had this discussion before, but see, to me, again, it's you kind of fixate on the no playoff win. I fixate on the 1-12 against playoff opponents. And I guess in a roundabout sort of way, we're kind of getting to the same point, because if the Dolphins had better success against playoff opponents, chances are they get a home playoff game. Chances are they would win it. But to me, like, I think the first step, if the Dolphins are going to get to the Super Bowl, the first step is they need to show they can be playoff opponents.
Yeah, I agree.
Even if it's in the regular, like this season, for example. Yep. To me, what cannot happen, like, it would be a disaster if the Dolphins finish even 11-6, but they're like 1-6 against playoff opponents. That would be, because that would tell me we have not made one iota of progress. More so than the playoff win. Yes, no, maybe.
I'm a playoff win guy. I want to see them. That both are important, but ultimately you've got to win playoff games. And really, to me, if you go 9-8 and win a playoff game, that's a successful season. You made progress from the previous 2 seasons, even though your win total is the same or less than it was those 2 regular seasons. Yeah. Sorry, it's about advancing in the play. You might have a bunch of injuries in the regular season that led to you being 9-8, like you did 2 years ago. Win a playoff game, get on the road toward winning a Super Bowl.
Fair enough. We could continue. I had a hypothetical that we could bring, but we could go around in circles for a bit, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to keep you any longer. We're gonna wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We will be eyeballing the joint practice with against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Wednesday after Mike McDaniel does a little media session. Hopefully gives us some clarity on what's going on with Tyreek and other issues. And we will be back tomorrow to wrap everything up. In the meantime, thanks, everyone. Thank you again, Mr. Perkins, as always.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you guys tomorrow.